Welcome to the show. Tonight, frosty talks in Canberra today, and empty ones too, with China's foreign minister after he insulted the government by calling a meeting with shameless pro-China apologist Paul Keating as well. Did that backfire? Also tonight, more global warming pain. Now even warnings that we'll run short of gas in winters as well as electricity in summers. How much incompetence did that take? Meanwhile, climate extremists appeal against their sentence for blocking a Melbourne bridge, but whoops, the judge then triples their jail time, which is good, but there still was something the judge said that wasn't quite right. Plus, Donald Trump warns that Prince Harry might have to pack his bags and go back to Britain if Trump becomes president again.
We'll have to see if they know something about the drugs and if he lied.
But first, and speaking of Donald Trump, Anthony Albanese's captain's pick has blown up in his face. The Prime Minister stupidly insisted on making Kevin Rudd his ambassador to the United States. Foreign Minister Penny Wong reportedly warned him, don't do this, but Albanese ignored that and made his mate, his former boss's Prime Minister, the ambassador. And that's now turning into a political disaster, because Rudd really is a megalomaniacal blowhard with a big mouth who once again has talked himself into strife. So we had Wong, who didn't want Rudd as our ambassador to the United States, and now we've got Donald Trump. He doesn't want Rudd either. We know that because Trump was asked in an explosive interview with Nigel Farage of GB News, an interview that we'll screen here tonight at 8:30, if he would deal with Ambassador Rudd once Trump becomes president after the November election, as polls suggest he will. Bang.
Now they've appointed Kevin Rudd, former Labour MP. I mean, he has said the most horrible things. You were a destructive president, a traitor to the West, and he's now Australia's ambassador in Washington.
Yeah, well, I don't know.
Would you take a phone call from him?
He won't be there long if that's the case. I don't know much about him. I heard he was a little bit nasty. I hear he's not the brightest bulb, but I don't know much about him. But if he's at all hostile, he will not be there long.
Yeah, it's been so funny today to see the media left look all puzzled. What? By Trump having a whack at Wacky Rudd. This on the ABC today was a classic.
And it's quite the statement. Wow.
It's another sign of just what a wild ride we're in for this year. So this is really just a personal attack on Kevin Rudd. We haven't seen, the backstory here in terms of anything that Kevin Rudd has done that has antagonised Donald Trump in this way. But as we saw when Donald Trump was president, things come out of the blue.
This came out of the blue. What's poor Kevin done to antagonise Donald Trump? Seriously, do these guys live in some bubble land over with Albanese, or are they really totally unaware of what a rude fool Rudd has been? Because you might recall 2 months ago when Trump was on his way to becoming the Republican nominee for the November election for US president, I predicted exactly this. Another win today for Donald Trump in the New Hampshire primary. And Kevin Rudd should now get ready to pack his bags. And of course, Trump's rise must mean Rudd's fall. That's why Albanese was so wrong to pick Rudd. Trump back then, even then, already nominated to be a candidate in the election, was already looking a hotbed to win. And Albanese should have known that Trump could well be president again, and Australia would therefore need an ambassador who could deal not just with President Joe Biden now, but also get on later with a President Trump. Be able to get Trump on the phone to ask for a favour for Australia. That's what you need from an ambassador. Someone like former Australian Ambassador Joe Hockey, who was so mated with Trump that they played golf together. And if that is what we need, that should have meant a hard no to Ambassador Rudd. Why would President Trump lift a finger for Kevin Rudd, knowing how freely he'd smeared Trump around the world? Because here, let me show you some of Rudd's unhinged character assassinations of Trump in the years before he was appointed ambassador. Donald Trump was a traitor to the West, said Kevin Rudd. Donald Trump was the most destructive president in history, a man who drags America and democracy through the mud and abuses Christianity, church and Bible to justify violence. In fact, he was mentally unhinged, Rudd told an ABC audience who loved it.
I think the general consensus amongst anyone concerned with the public policy process, domestic or international, thinks he's nuts.
Now, there was two problems with all this abuse, which is why Trump's reaction has most certainly not come out of the blue. The first is Rudd's lousy judgment. Trump can be erratic and volcanic, I know all that, but he is not nuts. He does not abuse Christianity to justify violence and is not a traitor to the West and definitely not the most destructive president in history. If you want someone destructive, just look at the old fool who's president right now, what he's done to America's borders, budget, economy, to the turmoil in the world. So Kevin Rudd, with his big mouth and his terrible judgment, actually helped to poison the world against Trump, which brings us to that second problem. Do you seriously expect President Trump to come to the phone for Rudd, to rearrange his schedule, to squeeze in a call from a man who's vilified him like that? Well, former Labor Senator Graham Richardson, for one, today said no, Rudd would have to go if Trump becomes president.
I think it would be in Australia's interest for him to be moved or recalled. We need an ambassador who can ring and have the president pick up the phone. And if you're not in that category, then you shouldn't be in the job.
But what's obvious to Richardson and to me is not obvious to the Prime Minister today. He just went off.
Will the Prime Minister be reassessing Mr Rudd's position as ambassador to our most important, or as Minister Farrell suggests, our second most important strategic ally?
One of the things that I have never seen happen before in 28 years in this chamber is an attempt to politicise Australia's representative overseas in an important nation such as that. A cheap shot question like that diminishes the opposition.
Yeah, well, the problem here is that we've also never seen before an Australian ambassador in Washington who so viciously and publicly abused an incoming president, potentially. So what a dumb call it was by Albanese appointing this joker, even if he says, oh, look, Rudd's been a terrific ambassador. When or if Trump is president again, what then? I mean, do we keep Kevin Rudd on to save Albanese from looking like a goose for choosing him? Or do we sack Kevin Rudd to save Australia from being a pariah in the White House? Which will Albanese choose, his country or his comrade? For him, it seems it's already been a tough choice. Like I said, watch the full interview that Nigel Farage did with Donald Trump. We'll screen it here at Sky tonight at 8:30. Do that because there are a couple of other important things that come out of this interview. It's a terrific viewing. One is that you'll see Donald Trump putting a big fat finger right on President Joe Biden's biggest and most bizarre disaster of the kind that many cowardly and blind politicians around the West are making as well, including here. It's immigration, or in America, illegal immigration to be precise. Biden has actually let up to 10 million people cross his country's borders illegally in just the past 3 years. Many from South America, of course, but also even Africa. People from as far away as China. Letting up to 10 million come in and letting more than 7 million of them stay. Now, 7 million illegal immigrants in the US under Biden. That is more than the population of Denmark, much more than of New Zealand. Think, just that many people, simply illegal immigrants in 3 years. Now, Trump, in his interview tonight, as usual, exaggerates and inflames the issues, but is absolutely right that this is a scandal and a danger.
They've destroyed our country. Look, they've allowed 15 million probably, that's the number, 15 million people. 15 million people, that's my opinion. Some people say it's a little bit less. What difference? It's bigger than most states. 15 million people to come in from prisons. They come from prisons, many of them. They come from mental institutions and insane asylums like Silence of the Lamb, Hannibal Lecter. I wonder if he's one of them. They're terrorists coming into our country, totally unchecked.
Yeah, if you wanted the type that says, oh, I'm shocked by his language and exaggeration and saying 15 million is 10 million. If you're shocked by how he talks about it, be even more shocked by what Biden's actually done. Here is Biden before the election and his Homeland Security chief after it, almost begging illegal immigrants to come to America, boasting that they've actually destroyed many border controls.
I would, in fact, make sure that we immediately surge to the border. All those people are seeking asylum. They deserve to be heard. That's who we are. We're a nation that says if you want to flee and you're fleeing oppression, you should come.
So we have rescinded so many Trump immigration policies, it would take so much time to list them.
Joining me on Culture Wars is Rowan Dean, Trump watcher, editor of The Spectator Australian, host of Outsiders and Sky News every Sunday at 9 a.m. Rowan, great to see you. It takes Sir Trump once again to call out something indefensible that many other leaders around the world, many politicians won't tackle, including leaders of European countries, who are also letting in waves of illegal immigrants cross their borders, land on their beaches. Now, like I said, journalists they might hate how Trump discusses this, but the greatest sin is by politicians who ignore this issue.
Andrew, yes. I would actually take issue with your claim that he's exaggerating. The number 15 million is merely an extrapolation from the 10 million who they know about and includes those that the Americans don't know about who cross over the border undetected at night or over places where they can easily get through. So there is every chance that it's not an exaggeration. But regardless, the point is that the numbers are simply staggering, and the proof of that is not the numbers themselves, but the impact this is having on cities throughout America, families throughout America, small town USA. They are reeling at the fact that this number of illegal immigrants are coming in and the effects that's having, draining welfare. School halls are being turned over to house them. Services are being diverted to them. You've even had left-wing mayors in places, Democrat mayors in blue cities like New York and elsewhere saying they simply cannot cope. So the numbers are out of control. There's a neat little irony here with what you were talking about before, Andrew, that, of course, if Donald Trump and Kevin Rudd do get to sit down together, perhaps Kevin Rudd can explain to Donald Trump how he did exactly what Biden has done. He tore up John Howard's successful Pacific solution, and he threw open the borders, and he, too, saw his prime ministership go down in flames because of that stupidity. The reality is, Andrew, as always, what appears to be exaggeration or hyperbole or anything else from Donald Trump tends to actually become the mainstream opinion within a short period of time. As you rightly pointed out, throughout Europe, Europe is reeling under immigration. And the idea, the gag about Hannibal Lecter, et cetera, well, we know here in Australia that the Albanese government has released from detention illegal immigrants who number amongst them rapists, murderers, pedophiles. So really the Hannibal Lecter tagline, amusing as it is not necessarily incorrect. We also know that our own country is now seeing an increase in immigration, and all around the Western world, Andrew, it's the same story. Left-wing governments believe ideologically that there should be more immigration, but more importantly, they believe that they get more votes out of higher immigration, so that's why they are unleashing this torrent of illegal immigration onto our shores and America's and Europe's.
Yeah, it's hard to believe otherwise why Joe Biden virtually welcomed it and why his chiefs are boasting about all the border controls they'd dismantled. I must say, in my 10 million estimate, based on official sources, I did include the getaways that we're talking about, but 10 million, 15 million, the thing is, that is one awful, there's a whole country load of people come in 3 years illegally. I mean, it's just insane. But what else did you get out of the interview that we'll be screening tonight?
Oh, it's a fantastic interview, Andrew, and it's a must-watch interview. Apart from immigration, he talks about the failures of Biden around the world, particularly as we've seen. What's great about the November 5th election is we literally get to compare the Trump administration years, the 4 years, with the Biden administration 4 years. That rarely happens in politics, and you then get to choose which way you want to go between them. We saw peace during Trump's period of office. We've seen war during Biden's period of office. We saw the Abraham Accords, a peace between Arabs and Israelis that nobody ever thought would happen did happen under Trump and is now being trashed under Biden. We saw the rearming of Iran. They've now got close to having nuclear weapons with all sorts of devastating consequences. That had been completely halted under Trump. So we've got, he talks very clearly about, now it's classic Trump, so he makes the claim, and we could say it's an exaggeration or not, but he does make the claim that under him there were no wars, under Biden there have been wars. He makes the claim that Ukraine would never have occurred and October 7th would never have occurred under his watch. I, for one, believe him.
Let me just play that, Rowan. Let me just stop you for a sec. I want to play that very
billions
grab.
And billions of dollars going to Iran.
I want to play that very grab and have you comment on it. I want to play that because I've been worried by Trump's attraction to dictators like Russia's Putin, China's Xi Jinping. Here's Trump trying to explain what's really going on with that and why he claims that he can just talk Putin into stopping the war in Ukraine. Not sure I believe it, but here's his explanation.
Is Putin the kind of man we can negotiate with?
Yeah, I think he is.
Do you?
So we did very well with him. Look, you know, I'm the one that was the one, I stopped the pipeline, Nord Stream 2. People don't realize that. You know, they say, I like Putin. I got along with Putin great. I got along with President Xi great. That's a good thing, not a bad thing.
Putin responds to strength.
I don't know. I don't know what he responds to. He responded to me. I can tell you one thing. He certainly wouldn't have gone into Ukraine. No way. And he didn't. You know, people say, well, how do you know that? Even Democrats say he wouldn't have gone if I were president. You wouldn't have Ukraine. You wouldn't have had Israel. The attack on October 7th would never have taken place. Iran was broke. They had no money. I said anybody that buys oil from Iran can't do business in the United States. And Biden comes along and he lifted everything.
Trump getting on with Putin and Xi is no bad thing, he says, is it?
It isn't, Andrew, because look at what Trump does rather than what he actually says. And the reality was we had peace under Trump, we've had war under Biden. That's the bottom line. Look at what Donald Trump does rather than listening to every joke he makes or every exaggeration he may make.
Scoreboard. Rowan Dean, thank you so much indeed for your time. Ah, dear. Well, did Paul Keating today just cause trouble? Did he blow up the meeting in Canberra between Foreign Minister Penny Wong and China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi? Because that meeting seems to have been frosty and certainly unproductive. Our Penny Wong would have been furious with China's Wang for organising another meeting tomorrow with Keating. The former Labor Prime Minister is a pro-China shill who's been bagging the Albanese government repeatedly for supposedly being too tough on China, when the opposite is actually true. This is Wong, actually China's Wang rather, trying to use Keating to divide Labor. And it's Keating agreeing to be used by the Chinese dictatorship. Now, the Chinese Foreign Minister is promoting Keating like this because he says exactly what China wants, that Prime Minister Albanese is too pro-American, shouldn't have ordered the new nuclear submarines through the AUKUS deal to defend us from China. Peaceful China.
For $360 billion, we're going to get 8 submarines. Right? This must be the worst deal in all history. China has not threatened us. It's all been untrue.
Well, this attempt to divide us with the Chinese Foreign Minister and Keating together might have caused the backlash, because Penny Wong came out of today's meeting with the Chinese Foreign Minister announcing no deal, no breakthrough, and instead listing all the criticisms she's made to Wong on China, including its harsh jailing of an Australian Chinese dissident.
We discussed the sentencing of Dr. Yang Jun. I raised Australia's concerns about human rights, including in Xinjiang, Tibet and Hong Kong. I expressed our serious concern about unsafe conduct at sea, our desire for peace and stability across the Taiwan Strait, and in our region.
As for China's foreign minister, he dodged the press conference there out of arrogance or maybe a fear of a hard question. To the panel, Cameron Milner, former Chief of Staff to Labor leader Bill Shorten, now Director of GXO Strategies, and Michael Costa, former New South Wales Labor Treasurer. Cameron, it's true that the Prime Minister and the Chinese Foreign Minister were all smiles during a photo session that lasted all of 40 seconds for the media. Again, no questioning was allowed. But did Paul Keating actually make things worse for China by agreeing to a meeting with the Chinese Foreign Minister in an obvious attempt by China to split Labor?
Oh, Paul Keating has, but Paul Keating is a sad apologist for Beijing, and it's a tragedy that this is the way he wants to be remembered in terms of politics. But isn't it wonderful to see that typical bully, Penny Wong, who's so good at giving it out, being bullied herself by Wang? It's an amusing sort of look at the reaction she had, so frosty, so steely. But the reality is that Penny's all about words, not about actions. If she was genuine, she'd go to Taiwan, she'd go to Tibet, she'd meet with people in Hong Kong who've been repressed by this Chinese regime, if she was genuine. So I think actions rather than words count for a lot. And Penny should actually react properly, not with a shopping list on one day, but every other day, pushing back against China.
But it's the first time for a while that I've heard her bring out a shopping list. So, I mean, I'm grateful for small mercies, although I do take your point. But, Michael, the thing is, of course, that there was nothing that they could point to that was productive out of these meetings, apart from the fact that it had occurred.
Well, that's true, Andrew, and I think that is productive, the fact that they're talking. But look, I take issue with what Cameron just said. I think Penny Wong did the right thing, and I'm not a fan from way back. I'm saying this, trying to look at it objectively. I mean, Keating is fast becoming the sort of Malcolm Fraser of the Labor Party, the former Prime Minister that nobody wants to be seen with. And I think she did stand up on those key issues. She listed all the issues I would have listed. I don't know what action we can take. What I'm concerned about is, all the pressure that's coming from the National Party and others, that somehow we do some deal on wine and all these commodities and give up the sort of principal issues to do with the South China Sea, the Uyghurs and everything else. And I might also add, I didn't see the Hamas fellow travellers out there protesting this bloke. They're so concerned about human rights, but here we've got one of the most repressive regimes, or a representative of it, out there, and there's no protests other than the protest of the Tibetan people. So, look, overall, I think Penny Wong did the right thing.
Excellent point about the protesters. The poor Tibetans are on their own. Where's the left now? Cameron, to Donald Trump, his attack on our ambassador, Kevin Rudd, who's so freely abused him before he became ambassador. Will Rudd have to quit if Trump becomes president again?
Well, no, because Rudd is Australia's representative in Washington, and I'm sure Kevin is the diplomat that we all know he is. He's got a great skill. Kevin's also the comeback kid. I mean, he was, betrayed by his Deputy Prime Minister, let down by an incompetent treasurer in Swan, and yet came back as Prime Minister because he charmed his way through with the Labor caucus again. I'm very confident that Kevin's skill set will actually be able to smooth over any previous comments and actually represent Australia's interests in Washington, regardless whether it's President Biden or President Trump.
Except, of course, Michael, there are two people in this particular equation. One is Kevin Rudd. The other, of course, is Donald Trump.
Yeah, well, look, firstly, I support the view, and I think it's the principal view, that we should determine our representative. I listened to Trump's comments pretty closely, and he didn't actually say he wouldn't work with him. He said if he behaved in a nasty way, he wouldn't last long. I think that were his exact comments. But let's take up the issue of what Trump said. I mean, many in the Labor Party said the same thing about Kevin Rudd. I wouldn't hire Kevin Rudd to be a sort of municipal dog catcher. He's so hopeless as far as I'm concerned. And the Labor Party took that view when they got rid of him the first time. However, he is our representative, and I think Albanese is right to stand behind him. And I think Dutton was a bit embarrassed today, given the comments that he made about Rudd's appointment. So at the end of the day, we're a sovereign nation. We'll determine who our representative is.
Well, that is actually true. Peter Dutton has actually praised Rudd. In fact, only a month ago, on Sky News. I must say, I thought he was far too generous to Rudd back then. Here he is.
I would work very closely with him. I've known Kevin. I caught up with him when he was last in Australia, and he came to give us an update in relation to what he was seeing in Washington. So he's represented his country well.
See, Cameron, Michael's right that we should be able to choose our representative. My point is, it was a stupid choice to make Rudd that representative. Because we want to get things out of the Americans if we can. And if you've got someone who's been trashing, the thin-skinned Trump all over the world, I'm not so sure that's a smart move. I mean, isn't that the problem initially, that it was a bad move to start with?
Well, there's a history here too, which is worth viewers knowing. I mean, Penny Wong did not want Kevin Rudd. Penny Wong and DFAT did not want Kevin Rudd. And in fact, Albo made a captain's pick to put Kevin Rudd in. Now, the reason for that was Kevin was about to run for party president, and Albo didn't want him in Australia. So Albo made sure he made the captain's pick to put Kevin Rudd in as the ambassador. But I think having got there now, Kevin is actually doing, as Michael said, Australia's work. I mean, he's representing Australia as a nation as the ambassador. So Kevin certainly has history. Penny Wong certainly has history that she did not want him there at all. But nevertheless, I think he's doing a good job in Washington.
And as for his ability to talk people around again, I must say that when he came back a second time as Prime Minister, quite a number of his cabinet ministers quit rather than serve with him. But anyway, there you go. Cameron Milner, Michael Costa, thank you both for your time. After the break, how the ABC is scaring children into hating the Liberals' nuclear power plans. You just wonder who is in charge of the ABC. It's so predictable, and it's such an insult to our intelligence. You trust the ABC, don't you, to push the anti-nuclear cause and push it even to children to make them fear nuclear power. The federal Liberals want to end the irrational ban on nuclear power, but it seems the ABC does not. Here is some of its Behind the News program, it's meant for children, discussing this terrible idea.
Nuclear power plants work by using a process called fission, which unlocks the power stored in an atom by splitting it. It's the same principle as atomic bombs. Except in nuclear power plants, the fission reaction is controlled. But not everyone thinks it's a good idea, because yeah. See, nuclear bomb tests in the 1960s and 70s soured the idea of anything nuclear in Australia. There were also a couple of terrible accidents at nuclear power plants. First, Chernobyl in 1986, then Fukushima in 2011.
Not mentioned by the ABC, nuclear reactors won't explode like nuclear bombs. The nuclear bomb test here more than half a century ago killed no one. The Fukushima reactor, which was hit by an earthquake and a tsunami, killed no one with its radiation, not one person. And the Chernobyl disaster, the only fatal of such disaster, was nearly 40 years ago in a superannuated reactor in the Soviet Union that's incompetent, and even then killed fewer than 60 people that we know of. Joining me on Newswatch is Sophie Ellsworth, media writer for the Australian newspaper. Sophie, look, you alerted me to this. Again and again, we are seeing this on shows like this Behind the News. It's as if this ABC show for children is run by veterans of far-left protest movements of last century, trying to pass on the last flickering flame to the children of ABC viewers.
Well, Andrew, my issue with these stories that Behind the News, this children's program put out, is this is going into classrooms, this is going into the youngest generation in this country and basically brainwashing them that this is a bad idea. Now, if this report was balanced and said the pros and cons of wind and solar energy, the pros and cons of nuclear energy, I think that's fair and balanced, but it's never fair and balanced. And Andrew, we've spoken many times over the years about these Behind the News reports that these children see, and often, Andrew, it leaves them being terrified that, in this case, nuclear energy is a shocking thing and it's something that Australia shouldn't adopt. This is what the young generation are being told at schools.
And you've followed this Behind the News series more closely than I have, but I've got to say, I haven't noticed one yet that's been accused of being too conservative, but everyone we've found to talk about has been far left. I mean, who's in charge of the ABC? We'll get onto that in a second. Meanwhile, there's a smell of death, Sophie, about Victorian Liberal leader John Pesutto is now facing leadership speculation. It's got defamation claims against him by 3 women he falsely implied were associated with neo-Nazis, and is now complaining that the media is out to get him. Here he is.
We just want fair treatment in the media. There are standards applied to our side of politics that simply aren't applied to the government. You would never, and tell me if I've got this wrong, you would never run some of these stories against the government. You wouldn't.
Now, personally, Sophie, I think John Pesutto's biggest problem is John Pesutto. It's not the media. What's his problem here? And does he have a case?
Well, his problem is his political career or leadership career is very close to ending, Andrew. He has one foot in the political grave. Going out and attacking the media as a politician wins you no friends and often results in the media going harder, Andrew. Now, I would argue down here in Victoria, the media, some parts of it, were very, very tough on the Labor government, particularly Daniel Andrews, for all manner of things. And then John Pesutto is now saying, I wouldn't get the same treatment. Now, whoever's advising him now, his job should be in jeopardy because everyone on this John Pesutto ship is jumping off because his leadership, I think, will be over in a matter of weeks. He is just in dire straits when he is actually criticising the media for its conduct. I mean, John Pesutto needs to take a look in the mirror. His media tactics are shocking.
Absolutely. Before we go, Sophie, give us an update here. You filed breaking news on the Antoinette Lattouf brawl that is splitting the ABC. Lattouf is the pro-Palestinian activist who, for some stupid reason, was hired by the ABC to be a radio host, filling for 5 days over summer. They woke up to themselves halfway through, sacked her, allegedly for posting anti-Israel material on a social media page. She claims she was also the victim of racism. But now a union-led group of ABC staffs demanded that the ABC's chief content officer resign over the sacking. Why is that? What's he done wrong?
Well, they're basically saying, this little activist group within the ABC is saying that Chris Oliver-Taylor, the chief content officer, was the one who pulled the pin and said, right, Lattouf's got to go. So they're now calling for his head, saying he should be sacked. They've had a vote of no confidence in David Anderson. Now, remembering this is only a very small, I think it was only 100-odd staff out of 4,000 that voted yes to the vote of no confidence in this, Andrew. But again, this is a mess. But the question I've been asking for months, who hired Antoinette Lattouf? That is the person whose job should be on the line. And that is why this whole problem is where it is now today, Andrew.
Absolutely. I should point out, as you say, I think it was about 75 staff out of 1,000 union staff there voted for this. And big news is the ABC staff. Sophie Ellsworth, thank you so much for your time. After the break, how bad do our politicians have to be to leave Australians not just short of electricity in summer, which we already knew, right, facing blackouts. Not just that, but now we're warned short of gas in winter as well. Plus, 2 global warming protesters appeal against being jailed for 21 days. That turned out to be a big mistake. You know, I can't believe what's been done to our country. We are blessed. We've got the world's biggest deposits of uranium for a start, except the nuclear power industry. Huge deposits of coal, of gas and oil, all of which we don't seem to want to use either now. Yet we haven't just managed, despite all these riches, haven't just managed to run short of electricity now for summer. Warnings of blackouts. Now we are warned by the same Australian energy market operator that we could also run short of gas in winter. That's when we need it most for heating. Now, one reason for that is that we're just not opening enough new fields fast enough to replace the ones running out. in Victoria. Can you believe this? All onshore gas production was banned by Labor for a decade, and fracking for gas is still banned. So we will be pure, global warming pure, but we will be cold. Joining me are Daniel Wild, Deputy Executive Director of the Institute of Public Affairs, and Evelyn Ray, Sky News contributor and regular commentator on this show. Evelyn Ray, let's start with the stuff up of electricity. We heard, we got these sky-high electricity prices, right? Because we're getting rid of the cheap stuff, the effective stuff, the stuff that works are going renewable. So for that and other reasons, we've got sky-high electricity prices. I know the federal government was boasting yesterday prices were now starting to come down a little after 2 years of massive rises. But I thought the Daily Telegraph summed it up well. Only $1,000 to go before Labor can make good its promise to cut our electricity bill by $275 next year from what they were a couple of years ago. Now, how could we have stuffed this up so completely?
I think it's pretty easy. I think it comes from the top down, and I think that the head of our nation is miserably failing at his job. And look, they can't admit that they're failing, and they won't admit that they're failing, because let's not forget Albanese's infamous pledge, "My word is my bond." They no longer have any credibility. And you know what they promised today, we know they could just take away tomorrow. And unfortunately, it's something we have come to actually now expect from our political class here in Australia. They squander the public trust just like they squander public funds. And who's better off for it? Them. Who's worse off for it? Us. It's always the public. But let's just keep this in mind as well, Andrew. They have no problem making use of Australian resources, because if they did, they wouldn't be exporting it to other places in the world. What they do have a problem with is Australians using Australian resources. And we have to start asking the question, why is that? Because it's not about the climate. It's certainly not about the climate.
Daniel Wild, why is it that we're now facing not just electricity shortages, but gas shortages? Daniel?
Sorry, I've lost it, Andrew.
No, I'll stick with you, Evelyn, while we sort that one out. Evelyn, let me read you some... Oh, Daniel, we have got you now. Daniel, why is it, how did we somehow manage to run short of both electricity and now gas? So the, risk of not having enough cooling in summer and heating in winter.
Well, Andrew, it comes back to failed political leadership at the state and federal level. We've got state and federal governments committed to the policy of net zero emissions by 2050. And in most cases, that's a bipartisan commitment that's been made. And that requires quite simply the decommissioning of our baseload power supplies. I mean, we're losing our coal-fired power capacity, and instead we're getting wind and solar power, which cannot get the job done at a mass scale. These technologies are experimental. We've seen what happens, Andrew, in Victoria, which has gone harder and faster than any other place in the nation down the renewable track. 500,000 homes without power. The government can no longer guarantee supply of energy to businesses and to households. This was always going to happen when you have an explicit policy that is focused on cutting emissions rather than focusing on reliability and affordability. What we need is leadership to say, well, hang on, net zero is no longer working. Let's get the baseload power into the system to get bills down and reliability up.
Oh, but Daniel, you forget all the green jobs that are going to be created.
Well, if only, Andrew. We're here in Rockhampton, and I can tell you there's not many green jobs here or in parts of the country that rely on mining, agriculture, manufacturing and transport. Look, we're told by political leaders that there's going to be green jobs. But over the last decade, for every one new job created in the renewable sector...
But we lost them. Evelyn, I want to read to you something about involving another religion that I think is really strangling us. West Australia has been fighting fires in the Perth Hills, And this is from the West Australian newspaper today, a report that says, well, the firefighters have been delayed in building containment lines for these fires. The incident controller says, I quote, "We have had to stop tracking with machines at the moment because we have had some Aboriginal cultural sites in the fire zone. We have got Indigenous liaisons working with us at the moment to identify those sites, and that will dictate where we can put those machines." Do you think Australians about really had enough of this kind of stuff and about to draw the line with this cultural heritage business when it comes to not even being able to fight a fire efficiently and fast until you've got a liaison to tell you where sacred sites are?
Andrew, it's beyond stupid at this point. You know, my ancestors are buried all over Europe and the UK, and they don't think twice before building a shopping mall or a car park over their graves. And you know why? Because it's a ridiculous expectation, and society cannot function based off this standard. But it also shows how widespread this mind virus is, this wokest mind virus. You know, that people are crippled with fear because they might offend somebody, this insane fear of being labelled a racist because you put out a fire the wrong way. It's infesting our emergency services now. You know, it not only shows how potent this mind virus of wokeism is, it shows how dangerous it can be. And, you know, this sort of mentality is putting the dead before the living. It's utter madness.
Well, if this is our future, we're in real trouble. Evelyn Ray, thank you so much for your time. Daniel Wild, if you're still listening, thank you for yours. I've got to say, 2 weeks ago, two global warming extremists, I'm telling you about this religion, this mind virus, as Evelyn was saying. Two global warming extremes helped to shut down Melbourne's Westgate Bridge. It caused massive traffic hold-up, so bad that one poor woman trying to get to hospital had to give birth by the side of the road. Other two people with mental health issues couldn't get help quick enough. Now, these two environmentalists were sentenced to 21 days jail, appealed to the county court. Whoops, the judge instead tripled their sentence to 2 months. But he did say they meant well, but I don't know if that's true, because what they meant was to bully people into believing their nonsense. And bullying is bad. Okay, there's nothing good about protesters like that at all. If you want to protest, just try to talk to us with reason. Go by the side of the street and shout your message from there. Do not stand in the middle of the road just to create a fuss. After the break, well, Kevin Rudd may not be the only person who'll be forced to pack his bags if Donald Trump becomes president. Trump warns Prince Harry could be out as well, but does Britain even want him back? Plus, is this man really the next James Bond, or should fans, well, at least just be glad Bond is still going to be a man? Yeah, so it won't just be Kevin Rudd who might be packing his bags if Donald Trump becomes president again after the November election. In his interview on Sky tonight with Nigel Farage from GB News, Donald Trump said Prince Harry could also be in trouble. When Harry and Meghan Markle moved to the US, you see, Harry had to fill in visa forms that ask, well, have you ever taken drugs? And you can get banned from entering the country if you say yes. Did Harry lie? Because as Harry actually admitted last year in his autobiography, Spare, he's actually taken cocaine, marijuana, magic mushrooms, and Trump was asked about that by Nigel Farage.
If he's lied on his visa form, doesn't the truth need to come out?
We'll have to.
Should he get special privileges that nobody else does?
No, and we'll have to see if they know something about the drugs, and if he lied, they'll have to take appropriate action.
Appropriate action?
Yeah.
Which might mean not staying in
America.
America.
I don't know. You'll have to tell me.
Joining me from London is Patrick Christie, star presenter on GB News as well as Nigel Farage. Patrick, how much trouble is Prince Harry in, do you think?
Well, he's potentially in a world of trouble, actually, isn't he, really? Because if he has lied about his drug use on his visa form, then, frankly, we'll have to be treated like everybody else. I would quite like to see these visa forms, because I wouldn't be surprised if it turns out he filled it out in crayon and Meghan stuck it on the fridge for a couple of weeks before they submitted it. He used to have people filling out these forms for him when he was a member of the royal family, so he could have lent on that. But this time now, it looks as though he's been left to his own devices and may well have lied. The only issue is that we don't really want him back. But I was thinking that maybe we could come up with some kind of swap deal for Donald Trump. They can take back all of the Americans that we have shouting on public transport and in restaurants over here, and we will have Prince Harry, but they have to keep Meghan Markle. That would, I think, be a fair swap deal for us. But Prince Harry would come back. He would also come back with a fatwa on his head because of the other stuff he put in spare about how many members of the Taliban he killed. So all in all, that book has got him into a heck of a lot of trouble.
I suspect so, although I must say it's like with Kevin Rudd. Trump didn't say he wouldn't deal with Kevin Rudd. He didn't actually say he would throw out Prince Harry, but it would be very interesting to know if Harry lied. And as you say, if he did. Meanwhile, more drama about another royal, Catherine, Princess of Wales, more media hoo-ha that she apparently photoshopped tiny details of this wonderful picture of the late Queen with the great-grandchildren. I mean, seriously, does anyone care? But more serious is that staff at the hospital where Catherine had abdominal surgery for some undisclosed issue actually tried to access her private medical records. I tell you, Patrick, all this must be getting too much for the poor woman.
Yeah, absolutely. No, really, really shocking news, this, about the idea that somebody who's unauthorised are trying to access her medical records and presumably sell them off to the highest bidder. It harks back to the really bad old days as well of journalism in this country, and also as well, you know, kind of investigative stuff that used to go on at hospitals. They are launching an investigation. One thing I will say though, Andrew, is that this has been an absolute PR disaster, not caused by Kate, but for whoever the Muppets are that are advising them or doing their media. You know, the Photoshop picture is one thing, creating a vacuum after vacuum after vacuum, a couple of other mysterious pictures. Then we've got this video of them at a farm shop that emerged that was filmed on someone's phone, again sold off to the highest bidder. Anyone could have done anything with that. They have completely lost control of the PR of our future king and queen during their greatest hours of need. And I think when the dust settles on this, they will have to really consider whether or not the people that they've got around them advising them have been doing a good job. Because they've got enough on, all right? And she obviously is very, very unwell. And the last thing they need is situations like this taking place at the moment.
I don't know why they just didn't auction off the original untouched photo for charity, make a joke of it and a good cause of it, and that would end that. But Patrick, good news. I think we're now past peak woke. Common sense might be becoming more common. Maybe I'm a dreamer. I'm a huge James Bond fan, the films and books. Couldn't believe that the next James Bond, after Pierce Brosnan and after him Daniel Craig, could even be a woman, some said, or a black man, or even a black woman. In fact, in the last film, there was a black woman briefly taking over as 007. We're now told by The Sun it looks like being British actor Aaron Taylor-Johnson, although the BBC says that's not true. Patrick, he looks quite all right in a way, but not quite right, does he?
Well, I suppose you can work wonders, can't you, in the film industry? I think the BBC say it's not true because they don't want it to be true. We all know who the BBC, I'm sure, would want to have as James Bond, and that is Dylan Mulvaney, OK? It's time to have Dylan Mulvaney as James Bond. No, look, shock horror, OK? James Bond is a straight white male. Don't mess with Bond. Bond is a hunky man, a bit of a womanizer who shoots bad guys. He is not an electric car driving, pink hat wearing vegan.
He's a Scottish orphan. Leave him alone, Patrick. Leave him alone. Absolutely. That's it from me. Thank you for your time. And that's it from me. Up next is Shari.